Why isn't Canada part of the USA? Why isn't Canada part of America? Both countries share the world's longest international border, and citizens can travel freely from one to the other. Many people cross the borders daily for work. They share the same language and values, and are both highly developed, multicultural societies. Canada and America share many cultural similarities in terms of popular entertainment, festive events, and religious diversity. Both countries have sports teams in major codes, such as the National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, and the NBA. So much in common. So why, then, isn't Canada part of the United States? Surely it makes sense. The simple answer? It was never going to happen, and it most likely never will. There have been some close calls, though. In fact, in 1812, the two countries were at war. They've since kissed and made up, of course, and are now staunch allies. Basically, Canada has always chosen to be Canada. To fully understand why they have remained as separate nations, we have to track the growth of each nation. We'll start with Canada. From the 16th century, Britain and France established colonies throughout much of Canada, often resulting in feuds over various territories. New France became French territory in the early 1600s, covering what is now Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec. In turn, Britain was swift to colonise, and in 1583 claimed Newfoundland as the first British colony in North America. Britain went on to establish further colonies down the Atlantic seaboard into what is now New England, and beyond to Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. Settlers of British stock far outnumbered their French counterparts. However, France had developed strong relations with the indigenous tribes, which had benefited them in the fur trade. Fishing and fur trading were major industries throughout the North American East Coast, and both countries were fighting to gain the ascendancy. Inevitably, they were pushed into war over a dispute concerning the Ohio River Valley. Britain and France both laid claim to land in Virginia and in Pennsylvania. It led to the French and Indian War, which was fiercely fought from 1754 to 1763. As you would expect, the fighting was intense, as both countries understood only too well the huge economic potential in North America. The British Secretary of State, William Pitt, realised this better than most. He knew that to gain control of the Canadian and New England territories would be a massive benefit for Britain in the future. He assembled masses of troops, supplies and weaponry, and quickly dispersed them to North American battlefields. France enjoyed some early victories. However, the power of the British Navy severely limited the French supply lines. The battle-hardened and experienced British troops took advantage of the weakened French forces, and Britain was able to comfortably defeat France. It was a decisive victory. It meant the loss of all territories for France, as Britain gained full control of the New World. France was left with a few small islands off the Canadian coast and in the Caribbean. In contrast, Britain was now in charge of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Quebec, and what is now Ontario. Quebec was unique in that its people were predominantly Roman Catholic. This, plus a culture with strong linkages to France, meant it was an anomaly amongst the Canadian provinces. Britain decided that it would be easier to let Quebec continue as it was, albeit with British rule. It led to the Quebec Act of 1774, which allowed the freedom of religious choice. It was to prove a most wise move, because an appeased Quebec was unlikely to cause problems for the mother country in the future. Although victorious, the French and Indian War came at a considerable cost for Britain. The only way to boost their finances was to start imposing heavier taxes on their North American colonies. This didn't go down well amongst what is known as the 13 Colonies. They formed the stretch of British-owned territories spanning the Atlantic coast from New England down to Georgia. They were New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The 13 colonies also felt they had no political sway or independence. This anger was to eventually lead to the American War of Independence in 1775. However, the patriots from the 13 colonies were soon to discover that not all of the British colonies were keen for rebellion. The Canadian colonies were, on the whole, loyal to British rule and content with the administration of their territories. This was due to the main province of Nova Scotia being largely populated by the British military. The other major region of Quebec was also appreciative for Britain allowing them special religious and cultural rights after the French and Indian War. Led by George Washington, the American patriots attempted to coerce Canada into taking sides against the British oppressors. The Americans set their sights on Quebec and headed north in an attempt to persuade the Canadians to join them in the fight. Washington declared, "The United Colonies know no distinction." Unfortunately for Washington, the colonies were not united. The Patriot soldiers attempted to enter Quebec, but were thwarted. The well-supplied Quebec forces were able to repel the Patriots, as Canadians made it clear they wanted no part in fighting for independence. The 13 colonies were left to fight on their own, which they did, successfully, resulting in independence in 1776. However, American forces were to get another shot at Canada a little later. In the early 1800s, Britain and France were engaged in bitter hostilities after Napoleon had taken over most of Europe. Britain was able to achieve a mighty victory in the Battle of Trafalgar and assumed control of the seas surrounding Britain and France. Any ships from America hoping to enter France had to first register in Britain and pay the requisite charges. This incensed the newly independent American states. On top of that, the British Navy raided American fleets and recruited sailors against their will, a practice known as impressment. Enough was enough. In 1812, America declared war on Britain and set its sights squarely on Canada. The USA intended to take Canadian territories and were confident of doing so easily. How wrong they were. The American forces hadn't learned from the War of Independence when they failed to persuade Canadians to join them in the uprising against Britain. Nothing had changed. The War of 1812 was a turning point in Canadian and American history. America was incredibly underprepared. They believed Canadians would only be too happy to be freed of colonial rule. They were wrong. They also thought there would be little resistance. They were seriously wrong. Thomas Jefferson claimed that it would be a mere matter of marching. Canadian forces were ably supported by Native American tribes who were concerned at the growing expansionism of the United States. Even though America's population far outnumbered Canada's, their troops were only 12,000 in total. They were incompetently led and poorly trained. After Britain secured victory over Napoleon at Waterloo, thousands of veteran British troops were immediately sent to Canada. The war reached a stalemate, and in 1814 a peace treaty was signed. All land taken by either side was returned. The 1812 war was the first time Canadians had come together to defend their land. It united the nation and sparked a strong feeling of patriotism and self-belief. In 1867, the old colony of Canada was divided into new provinces: Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick. On July 1st, it became the Dominion of Canada and granted the right to self-rule. July 1st is now known as Canada Day. As the population grew, people continued to venture west, and Manitoba, British Columbia, and Alberta were soon added as official provinces. The new nation was up and running, proud, resourceful, and independent. And just as America celebrates its independence on July 4th, Canadians come together on July 1st for their special day. They raise their glasses and sing their song, "O Canada."